welcome to Poland Daily Culture. I'm Paulina Otterstein.
And I'm John Carter. And today we're here at the Linen Museum in Żyrardów. Join us as we find out exactly why this was one of the premier factories during the industrial period.
The Museum of Linen has its headquarters in one of the post-industrial buildings of Bielnik, which was once part of the production complex of the Żyrardów factory. The monumental post-industrial spaces of the Linen Museum in Żyrardów are closely related to the more than 180-year tradition of the linen industry. The building once housed a branch of the Żyrardów printing house of the linen works, which by the end of 19th century had become the most powerful flax factory in Europe at that time, and the products were known and valued all over the world. The building of the museum's headquarters is a historic object, part of a 19th century factory settlement in Żyrardów, recognized as a historical monument that is the highest form of monument protection in Poland.
So we're here in the Linen Museum of Żyrardów. Of course, did you know, Paula, Żyrardów was actually named after the guy who's the kind of figurehead, let's say,
Really?
of the
What
whole
was
place.
his name?
Philippe de Gérard.
Oh, so he was French.
Frenchman. Well, notice, yeah, with my French accent. So yeah, interestingly, you know, he really had this massive impact on this whole kind of this factory, and then subsequently the town, and of course then subsequently high schools, both here in Żyrardów and in France, in Avignon, were named after him. Mm-hmm. Amazing sort of figure from European history, who scientist, inventor, directed the whole factory. Have you ever heard much about this guy?
No, but it makes sense. De Gérard and Żyrardów.
It does indeed, yeah. So he really was like a great guy and, well, kind of a spearhead for this whole thing. So he kind of brought this process of taking the bush, the flax bush, and then he had this kind of mechanical machinery. He invented several machines which could then take the bush and create then the linen, and then create some sort of actual material from that. And so...
What century was that in? Was it the 19th?
I think that, yes, you're right. 19th century, probably kind of early 19th century. And yeah, he was a real trailblazer for both Polish and French history. Yeah. I think he was really honoured in both countries. Mm-hmm. He was sort of mentioned as saying that, you know, Poland was his country now. Yeah. So he grew up in France, educated there, but really spent, you know,
most of his life in Poland.
Exactly.
Interesting story.
Is indeed, yeah. So after sort of Philippe Gérard's sort of influence, it was strange sort of times after that, and sort of looking through the history of this whole place, you know, you've had kind of Russian and German ownership and all sorts. But one of the most interesting things which kind of stood out for me was the Spoolers strike.
One of the bigger ones, or more significant ones in the history of Europe, I think.
Absolutely, yeah. So the Spoolers were, well, they were sort of operating these machines, and it was all women. Mm-hmm. So in fact, this is significant because I think it was the first women's strike in Europe. Mm-hmm.
They weren't getting paid enough, I think. Was that the reason?
I think their wages had been cut. They were unhappy about the fact that children under the age of 15 were working. Mm-hmm. They were having to work long hours. So things really got kind of intense, and most of them went on strike. But of course, they kind of had their the Russian owners at the time, who were kind of occupants, let's say, of Poland during that era. And sort of when message got back to the occupants, you know, the Tsarists, that the workers were rebelling, I think didn't go down very well.
No, I can imagine.
Yeah, but you know, there's a real strong story in there, because in fact they stood firm. Some of them got thrown in prison. Some, in fact, were even murdered. At the end of it, though, they stood strong enough, and the factory needed them so much that in the end they got what they wanted. So no children under the age of 15 working. They worked an hour less each day, and they had their
higher salaries.
Got their wages returned to what they previously were. So they actually had a kind of working salary. So I think that was kind of 1830s, that sort of time.
I think so, yeah.
What's the most memorable part of, because you've been here for most of the day now, most memorable part of this?
I think the machine that we were looking at with the lady who used to work as a linen fabric maker, she showed us the machine and how it works, and like we saw all the details, and we even could hear the sound, so that was quite exciting.
Did you learn some new skills since being here?
Not really, no, to be honest. I think it's too hard.
With your hair,
It doesn't look very easy, to be honest.
Yeah,
The machine is huge, and it has so many different parts, and yeah.
So she'd been working here for how long?
38 years, I think.
I mean, that's
So
amazing.
she's
Because when you think about
very
it,
experienced.
yeah, I mean, the factory actually finally closed back in 1999.
Yeah, and then the museum opened in 2014, I think.
2014,
So it's
right?
quite a new thing, but from what I've heard, there has been a lot of changes made already.
Yeah, I mean, she must have then overseen that time from when it was a fully operational factory and into the museum it is today.
It is.
I mean, it really is very sort of unique place. And it's amazing when you learn about how many people worked here as well.
How many was it?
I think in total, like, I forget, thousands and thousands, though, which is really something impressive.
It was one of the more dynamic factories, I think, in Europe in those times.
Very much, and in fact, it was the #1 sort of flax being the bush that that linen is made from. So it was the #1 kind of flax-based factory in the whole of Europe back in the 19th century. So it really was something groundbreaking at the time, and made kind of Poland the real centre of linen operations.
And so concentrating on those times that we're living in. So it's a museum now that one can visit, and people usually visit, I think, 6 months in the year, in the warmer months. And they also, what do they have? They have some animals that one can look at, or even go on a walk with.
Have you checked the alpacas?
Yes, and they also have 2 donkeys, I think, and 2 camels. So it's quite a big variety of exotic animals.
What's the story behind the animals then?
I'm not sure. Maybe they used to belong to someone who works here.
Okay.
But it's a big attraction for the people, I think, who live in Żyrardów.
Aha, yeah. Because, I mean, now it's a kind of sort of post-industrial city.
Yeah.
So I guess this kind of the opportunity to have a little taste of something, I don't know, can I call alpacas and donkeys exotic?
I think so.
It is
Alpacas came from Peru, I think.
Right.
So it makes it kind of exotic, traveling all the way to Poland.
It really does. Well, it really does in a way. And what other museum has had South American animals located on the premises?
Exactly.
It is something quite unique, yeah. So I think that the factory is something, it's really well worth visiting. You know, people often maybe go to Warsaw and they become sort of quite Warsaw-centric in
And it's
visiting.
only 40 minutes from Warsaw
Just
by
a
car.
40 minutes drive.
There's also a train, I think.
So it's really something worth seeing. You know, you get to sort of stroll about this huge place. It's difficult to even get the perspective of quite how big the whole place is, because on film rather, you can So huge high ceilings and just enormous machinery, and you really can be amongst it and get a real feel for the whole place, which is something I think you don't necessarily get from maybe other places that you could visit so much. So yeah, it's given me a new insight into
Same here.
how
I'm very
linen-
positively surprised.
Yeah, indeed. We've been through, what have we been through? Spooling, bleaching, dyeing,
Weaving.
printing, weaving.
Everything.
Seen it all. Fantastic. All right then. So
Let's maybe walk somewhere
let's go and check
and
out.
explore some more.
Indeed, let's go and do it. Thank you very much for joining us here at Poland Daily Culture from the Linen Museum in Żyrardów. I'm John Carter.
And I'm Paulina Otterstein, and see you again tomorrow.